So welcome everybody, the Gin and Tonic Show. The Gin and Tonic Show. More gin than tonic. It's the 5th of July 2015 and we are talking about Islam. Who are we? Well, we're just people who are non-Muslims, in other words, a non-believing person. So the way that the Gin and Tonic Show works is we have some definitions, we have a video of the week, misconception of the week, some news, some topics, Hadith of the week, and then we just talk with people. So the video of the week that I have selected today is one where Tom Holland actually explains or provides his input on the Islamic State, on Daesh. The video is called Tom Holland on so-called Islamic State, and it is in the channel of Islam and Islamic Archive. Now, what Tom Holland does here, remember he's not a scholar, he's not a theologian, he's not a religiously sort of educated person. He is a historian, so he looks at it from a factual point of view, and he says, if I look at Daesh, because it's not Islamic State. I refuse to call them state. It's not a state. It's not really Islamic either. It's just some stupid idiots who think they can oppress everybody else and go crazy. So he explains his view on what Islamic State is, what they do, and why they do it. And I think this is some brilliant insight into the history of Islam, what Muhammad did, and why Daesh are copying what Muhammad did. Now, I was tempted to take a different video because LDM, my favorite clowns, who are providing so much entertainment to people. The LDM, the London Dawah movement, which is now calling itself more and more like the global Dawah movement, and they've now opened a new thing, the Mission Dawah. They brought out a video, which is quite recent, called When Science Met Reason. I don't know why it's past tense, met, when science met reason. But this video is simply too stupid. It's like, they don't understand anything about science. And it's Hamza Sources, and I can't remember the other guy. And it's like what Hamza is saying, like a scientist relies on past data. In other words, if a biologist comments on the DNA or something like this, then he relies heavily on what others have done before him. And this is relying on complete hearsay. But a Muslim bases their beliefs on testimony. And that is more reliable. It's so stupid. Okay, I don't even know if I'm going to address this at some stage, because I'm not, actually I didn't want to advertise it, because there's a Dawah Response Team channel now, and I've uploaded the first one, where I take something that Hamza Sources has, what he did during his speech, and I try to, give some facts around this. And I don't know if I'm going to address this, because it's just simply too stupid. Okay, if anybody wants to do something with this, welcome. This should be a lot of fun. Misconception of the week. This was the video of the week on Tom Holland on Daesh. Then we have the misconception of the week, which I have chosen today, which is, I don't even know if I've done this before, which I call peace. Now, peace, in the way that I understand it, the way I use it, is the absence of violence, the absence of killing, the absence of destruction. But when a Muslim uses it, it's actually the joint submission to their one and only God. So what Daesh is doing when they are beheading, killing, extorting, and blah, 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 then this is peace. Because they are all submitting themselves to one God, and that this is highly violent and blah, 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 has nothing to do with the concept of peace. And this is why you always hear, Islam is the religion of peace. Of course it is, because it's propagating one God. And as long as you submit to one God, doesn't matter how many people you kill or how badly you are treating women, you are at peace. And that is the misconception that a lot of people don't understand, that peace in Islam is different to the peace commonly known. Now let me do this a little bit different than last year, last time, because I have some news items, but I'd like to go through them, and then instead of me just reading through them, let's look at them, because I've got like how the USA is now sort of reducing their celebration spirit because they've had so many threats, or like a guy in Seattle killed a couple of people for the US involvement in Iraq, and he's done all sorts of things, and people in the US don't really know what to do with them. Then, I mean, there's a couple of Daily Mail stories, but they're still legit, I think, because I found them on other news sites as well. Like some woman who recruits other jihadists, how she laughed when she heard that the people in Tunisia were killed. And then it gets a lot worse, where Daesh have released another video where they show the killing of a whole bunch of like 20 or something by boys, by little kids who are killing these people. And then, of course, the contrasting view where a student in a school was forced to remove her painting, and then the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is becoming more and more like North Korea. So these are the topics that I've got today, so maybe we go through them. If anybody wants to comment on them, then let's go ahead. The way that the Gin and Tonic show works is, ideally, we have Muslims discussing this together with us. Because a Muslim is actually supposed to discuss, explain, and provide information about their belief in a very polite way. This is something that you can find in the Quran, but for some reason, very few come here and do so, even though they are obligated by the Quran and by their God to do so, but they don't come here for some odd reason. All right, so let's start with the first item in the news, which is the USA. Now, we all know that the USA has something called Independence Day, where they celebrate their independence from the UK when they actually founded the United States of America, which initially were just a couple of states, and I'm not going to go into the whole history of this. Normally, traditionally, you get a whole lot of celebrations. You get planes flying overhead, you get parties, you get, people go crazy because it is like the number one secular holiday, and it's only surpassed by Christmas, I think. But this year, many of the celebrations were cancelled because of threats of violence from the various peaceful Muslim groups. And my question is, should a country curb celebrations, or should they rather rely on their prior intelligence data, trust their intelligence data, and go ahead and celebrate and hope that they have done their job and that there will be no interruption? Or should they actually go and stop celebrating and stop life and, just cower down in fear just in case somebody will attack them? Should we learn to live with violence, and should we learn to live with terrorist attacks as part of our lives? What do you think? Who is here? We have GPZ. Do you want to contribute something? Not really. Jeremy, do you want to say something to this?
Hiya. Yeah, every week I think I'm just going to listen and then you say something. I'll go back to when you said that IS isn't a state and it's not really Islamic either.
Okay.
You said that a bit. I don't see how it's not Islamic. It reminds me of interview with Maajid Nawaz on the BBC I saw recently on YouTube. It's called "Why is ISIS Attacking During Ramadan?" And he was doing this thing where he said, "Well, opposition to ISIS, not ISIS rather, opposition to the recent Muslim attacks, in France and in Tunisia." Fall into one of two groups. One is the people who are being really polite and saying it's got nothing to do with Islam, and the other group who say it's got everything to do with Islam. And he referred to us, myself part of that group, as anti-Muslim bigots. I mean, a bigot's supposed to be someone who's utterly intolerant of anything other than their belief system, so that's a nonsense description. But he then went on to admit that, you know, ISIS are, which is inconsistent with what he's just said, that ISIS are just going back to the roots of Islam, maybe even to the days of Muhammad. So it seems to me that they're profoundly Islamic. I don't see why they're not really Islamic.
Okay, the way that let me try and explain this. If I say they're not 100% Islamic, what I mean is a car can speed, but it's not fundamentally a speeding device. So Islam is not something that is only focusing on being used in a violent way. So what I'm saying is that the Islam that is being used in the way that Daesh is using it is neither in the name of all Muslims, nor does it reflect the entirety of all Islam. Now, if you take Islam has different, well, I don't know, different faces, different areas, different approaches to all sorts of different things. But the thing is that you can't say that Islam equals what Daesh is doing. And you can't say Daesh is doing what Islam tells them to do, because we have contradicting messages in the Quran. Like I always try and say that there are positive messages in the Quran. And you can find positive messages in the Hadith as well. So it's down to interpretation, and this is what I see that this is being done. So Daesh is doing it in one way, which is going back to the fundamental issues, the way that, not issues, the fundamental interpretation, the way that Muhammad saw it, or it gets very difficult, because if we assume that Muhammad did not exist, then we have to understand how the people who were writing about him, what they were trying to do, what was their intention behind describing Muhammad, the human being who was supposed to be the idol, who was supposed to be able to do all the things that the Islamic God, gave people to do, who was able to do it, and how this then ties in with all the violence that he propagated. And there you have the conflict in the message. So you have conflicting information in the Quran, you have conflicting information in the Hadith, you have conflicting information regarding the behavior of Muhammad. Now, how do you make sense out of that?
Why would you assume that Muhammad didn't exist?
No, I'm saying that there is no evidence for the existence of Muhammad. But then this has consequences, because then I have to go and say, okay, how does it then account for the stories that you have? How does that fit together? How does all that work? So I'm saying there's no evidence, because I can't see any evidence for the existence of Muhammad, other than some texts, but they are fairy tales. So just because somebody in a fairy tale talks about Rumpelstiltskin or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and things, this doesn't mean that these people existed. Now, with Jesus, I'm 100% sure that he didn't exist. With Muhammad, I'm still undecided. I do not know.
The narrative of the Quran and the Hadith seems to fit in quite nicely with the idea that he did exist, because you've got a guy who didn't have much political power, started out all peaceful in, was it Mecca? Yeah. He was peaceful in. Yeah. Then went away, built up political power, and then came back much more aggressive, killed off all the Jews in Medina, and just asserted Islamic dominance.
But did that really happen?
But well, okay. Even if it didn't happen, it's the core of the Islamic doctrine, isn't it?
And that's the point.
The core of the
Islamic
story.
Exactly it. That's it.
That's what I. So when you've got a group that's trying to act in a similar way as the founder was supposed to have acted, even if he didn't exist, I would call that Islamic. I mean, I wouldn't say that's not really Islamic, because that seems to me to be acting in the spirit of Islam.
Yeah, but what is the spirit of Islam if everything is contradictory and everything is down to interpretation?
Well, if we know about Islamic history, we can see that Islam historically expanded in a very militaristic way most of the time.
Right.
So that seems to me to be the spirit of Islam. I mean, why would you look at that history and the fact that ties in with the Islamic texts and sort of conclude that, well, it doesn't seem that might not be Islamic?
Yeah, but I mean, any kind of expansion is military.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you might persuade people that your ideas are good ideas, but
Has that ever happened?
Sorry?
Has that ever happened?
The Enlightenment, maybe?
What enlightenment?
Enlightenment in the West, where scientific method got popular.
Yeah, but that was not an expansion of territory.
Yeah, it was an expansion of ideas. I mean,
okay. I'm talking about territorial expansion.
Well, yeah, but territorial and the expansion of Islamic territory and the Islamic doctrine go hand in hand, don't they? You can't really have Islamic territory without it being run by Islamic doctrine.
Okay, and this is exactly the point. But now, if we take the military expansion, is that all there is to Islam? Was there ever a time in history where there was no military expansion, and whether there was a time of, I don't know, consolidation?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm not a history scholar. It seems to be that most of the time during Islamic history there was some sort of expansion, whether it was expansion across the Arabian Peninsula, into Mesopotamia, across North Africa, up into the Iberian Peninsula, maybe pushing into Turkey, and then you had the Ottoman Empire, which they tried to expand a bit, didn't they? You had the Golden Horde, you had the Timurids, you had Muslim expansion into Pakistan, East Pakistan, Indonesia.
Okay, what about people like Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, and I don't know, Ibn Sina, and people like that?
Are these caliphs?
No. They were just Muslims.
I'm not familiar with them.
They were philosophers.
Right, but I mean, were they living during a time of Islamic expansion or consolidation?
Yes.
They were living during
years ago.
Islamic expansion.
They lived just after that. They lived at the well, I would call it the pinnacle of the expansion. Because they lived when it was still when you still had Al-Andalus and things like that. So this was just like 100, 200 years before it collapsed.
The extent of the Umayyad Caliphate?
No. That's much. Umayyads is. I'm talking about a time period 500 years after the Umayyads.
Right.
So I'm saying that the Islamic expansion stopped at some stage because they never conquered the entire planet. They just conquered some areas of it. I mean, a good deal of it, but not everything. But what I'm saying is, yes, you had the military expansion, but you also had the philosophy, you also had the music, you also had architecture, you also had poetry, you also had the fine arts. So you had all that. So it was not only about military expansion. So I'm saying Islam is not only about military expansion. Yes, Islam is about Sharia, but the Sharia also is not only about military and not only about punishment. There's also a lot of encouragement in that, and this is why I think it's not only the military and the violent Islam that we need to look at.
We've established that this 1001 inventions thing is nonsense, so there are very few, not zero, but very few scientific inventions owing to Islam.
Correct.
And as for all the cultural stuff, well, it seems like it stole a hell of a lot of that from the cultures that it rampaged over, doesn't it? I mean, the Pakistani cultures that were there before.
Yes, what I'm saying is that somebody who takes texts and translates them is not somebody who is violent and out on a military crusade.
Right, so you're saying that the fact that there were some Muslims who didn't happen to want to crusade against the infidels means that Islam was sort of generally peaceful.
No, definitely not. No. What I'm saying is, on top or next to all the military and violent and blah, blah, blah contents that you get in the text, which you see enacted in reality, you have another strain, and you have several other strains. You have a different strain. Now, GP, if you now start another discussion with the texting now, this does not really help. If you want to raise a topic, why don't you raise a topic and then you bring this up? not while we're talking about something, then randomly post some text in there, which we need to look at later, or something that it doesn't really make much sense.
Post it on the Vaughan chat.
Yeah, put it on the Vaughan chat or something like this, or if this is on topic, I just saw something about John of Damascus or something like that. Anyway, what I'm saying is that in Islam, in be it the Quran, be it the Hadith, be it whatever, you get different types of texts. You don't only get the violent ones. You don't only get the expansive military crusade ones. You also get some which we say, no, look at yourself, reflect on what the Quran says, and try and be pious as well, and dress modestly, and things like that. So there's a lot of different things which are part and parcel of the Quran, of the text, and of Islam, which is not violent and not only military expansion.
Yeah, okay, so it sounds to me like you're saying that ISIS aren't really Islamic because they don't really take into account the aspects of Islam that aren't particularly militaristic. But,
for example, yes.
Those aspects are quite significant in Islam, aren't they? So I think I probably would describe them as quite Islamic. I mean, if you had a neo-Nazi regime that wanted to kill all the Jews and wanted to slaughter all the disabled people and a bunch of other people, I would probably describe them as Nazi or Nazi-esque, even if there were some peaceful elements of Nazism or more commendable elements of Nazism that they didn't subscribe to.
Okay, so if we take Nazis, they also had some positives. I mean, they came into
so would you say that a neo-Nazi state
against unemployment?
Yeah, so would you say a neo-Nazi state that didn't have those positives but had all of the very significant negatives wasn't really a Nazi state?
No. Okay, and this is now where we go. So if you have then a Nazi state, is it only about negatives? If I am now a Nazi, is it possible for me to do something positive? Emotionally, no. But factually, yes, because if I have a plan against unemployment, and this is resembles the plan that the Nazis had, I am taking something positive from the Nazis. Now, what I'm trying to say is, not everything in Islam is negative. Yes, of course, Daesh is basing their violence on the interpretation of the Quran and of Islam and of Islamic texts. Absolutely. I mean, there's no two ways about it. But what Daesh is doing is not representing all of Islam. That's what I'm saying. So there is not everything that they are doing is actually in the name of Islam and according to the Islamic texts. So it's not 100% of this, neither is it 100% of the other. So what I'm saying is we need to be differentiating here when we say that they are just copying Islam. And that is, I think, a little bit unfair to say that this is only negative. That's what I'm trying to say.
Obviously I agree with you on the fact that it's not 100% negative. I mean, virtually no ideologies are going to be 100% negative. But I think I would just define things slightly differently from you. So if it's
how would you say it then? Can I just bring another example or maybe analogy, just to make my point very clear? Would you say there is such a thing as the communism?
There is such a thing as communism.
No, the communism.
I wouldn't say the communism, no.
Exactly, and is there such a thing as the communist? No, and this is what I'm.
But there is such a thing as communistic.
Okay, there we go. And now, is Russia now the enactment of communism?
No.
Exactly, and this is what I'm saying. Is it's communistic. In other words, there are grains of communism in the socialism of the Russians.
It's not even communistic. Under Putin, it's pretty much fascist.
No. I'm talking about 40 years ago.
Oh, you mean the USSR?
Yes.
Well, I would definitely describe that as communistic.
Exactly, but it was not the communism.
No, but communistic. So I see adjectival.
Okay.
Islamic.
This is
the Islamic State is Islamic.
Exactly. And here we go. And this is where I would now apply the analogy and would say, yes, Daesh is Islamistic, but it is not the enactment of Islamist or Islam itself as a totality.
What I was objecting to is the fact that you said it's not really Islamic.
okay, then I should rephrase that as not totally and 100% or whatever. But then somebody's going to ask me, well, what is Islam? And there I go again, and I say, I do not know. Like the same way, if somebody asks me, what is communism in its purest form? I will say, I do not know. Because Islam also contains this element of the fair distribution of resources amongst the people. So there's also communistic. So there's a, I don't know, it's a mixed bag, I think.
Isn't the sort of core set of doctrines the idea of domination of the world?
Absolutely.
Isn't the
Yes.
core set of doctrines?
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
if they're embracing the core of Islam, even if there are a few details that they're not embracing, I think it's fair to describe them as Islamic, even if they, you can make arguments they're not embracing every single tenet.
Okay, but the domination is by the God.
Yeah, but because he doesn't exist, he has to
He has to use
offload
humans.
all of that on his
Okay,
on
there
his
you go.
human
All right.
followers.
That's it. That's exactly where the shortfall is. Yes. Okay, then let's quickly go and take a look at what GPZ said. This is now the topic of Muhammad, the way that whether Muhammad existed. We've sorted out Tom Holland, and now John is talking of Muhammad. John lived in the expansion and conquest. Okay, but Muhammad didn't. He said, how is it that when he enjoined us this book of yours not to do anything or receive anything without witnesses, you did not ask him, first, do you show us by witnesses that you are a prophet, that you have come from God? Okay, I don't understand. It's a pity you can't talk, because it would be a lot easier. Because I don't understand who is saying what to whom. When we ask again, is that John of Damascus asking, how is it that when he enjoined us in this book of yours, oh, does it mean that he is God? How is it that when this God gave us this book saying not to do anything or receive anything without witnesses, you did not first, do you show us by witnesses that you are a prophet, that you have come to God? So in other words, this is John talking to Muhammad. Is that correct? Show us what scriptures there are, testify you they are ashamed and remain silent, then we continue, all day you may not marry a wife without witnesses. So John is talking to the followers. So John, there's some guy in Damascus talking to some other guys, and he is talking about show us by witnesses. How does that show anything about? How does that show anything about Muhammad? Yet it is only your faith in your scripture that you've written for what he handed down. Okay, there's nothing here about Muhammad, so I don't quite understand how this is relevant. I mean, talking about Muhammad, I mean, I can talk about James Bond, but that does not mean that James Bond existed. I mean, I can talk to people following Star Trek, but that does not mean that Captain Kirk actually existed. So I don't quite understand how this has anything to do with Muhammad. The companions say Muhammad said this, and John said, yeah, this is exactly it. Muhammad said this. This is hearsay. This is the same thing of what we have with Jesus, where people said, well, yeah, but so-and-so said this about the Christians, and if there had been no Jesus, there would be no Christians. Well, it doesn't work like that. Either you have real evidence for something, or you don't. So the way that it stands now, this is just hearsay, somebody talking about something else, which doesn't make any kind of sense. So no, there's no evidence for the existence of Muhammad, because then people come up with this doctrine of Jacobi, and there's the Eusebius. No, who was it? Some guy in Armenia, 1,000 kilometers away, says something about something else, and no, this is all nonsense. This has nothing to do with evidence. Okay, so my original question was, should a country curb celebrations, or should they just go ahead if they are, in any way sure that they have apply due diligence and are careful with what they say? Should they go ahead and trust their own intelligence, their own police, their own spies, that they know what is going to happen in the country? No answers? And should we learn to live with violence and terrorist attacks? Or should we just say, it's not going to happen, let's just ignore this?
Violence and terrorist attacks, absolutely, because the alternative is Orwellian.
Sorry, somehow it's scratchy, so I didn't hear what you said.
I said we should absolutely learn to live with violence and terrorist attacks. And anyone who says they can eliminate that, and every time one happens we need to crack down on it, you're going to get an Orwellian total surveillance state. There's no other way of doing it. I'd rather have a bit of terrorism.
The way that it worked in South Africa, they said, look, we have done what we could, and we're going to have a celebration, and this is to the best of our knowledge, and it's okay. And if then something happened, they said, well, sorry, there is no 100% safety, and we just need to accept it, but we give you the assurance that we have done everything that is humanly possible to be sure that it's not. And this is the realistic approach, I think. So I was just wondering, Plato, do you have an opinion on this? Welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. Plato 442. You have joined the Gin and Tonic shot show. Do you have an opinion?
I've just come on. I haven't heard what's been said. I'll wait and see what's been said.
Okay. Well, let me just ask you: do you think that we should live with violence and terrorist attacks as part of our lives?
I don't think you'll ever get rid of violence. Terrorism, we might be able to minimize it, but violence will always be there.
Okay, then if we know that it's there, should we then curb celebrations? Or should we just say, no, we're doing everything that is humanly possible, and if it doesn't work, well, shit happens?
That's it. That's exactly it. You should carry on. You try to carry on a normal life as possible, if you can.
And not let terrorists run our lives.
Absolutely. I think if you're cowed into terrorism, you might want to stay home and not go out at all.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, any other opinions? Anybody else who wants to volunteer the information? Alassa, what do you say to this? Have you heard this? No, he's also not in a communicative mode today. Okay, well then let's go to the next topic. A guy killed some people in Seattle. This was as revenge for the US involvement in Iraq. And then he killed again and again and again. He hates gays, so he kills them. And this Ali Muhammad Brown just went moggy again and again and again, and the system in the States did not recognize what this person was. And now he was on probation because his crimes were not taken seriously. And initially, and this is the funny thing, he was involved in a bank fraud. And this scheme was there to raise funds for his crusade, which included other Muslims as well. And apparently, he even sexually assaulted children, like raping a 6-year-old. Because Muhammad could, so why shouldn't he? And what was his motive? I just want to die as a shaheed, he said. The shaheed is a martyr for this God. And that's all he wanted. He was just trying to, revenge Islam. And what he chose to do is violence, not by holding up the Quran and saying, look what a brilliant book this is. No, but by killing those who did not believe. And then saying, well, there's it. Taftaki Opel, you don't want to believe, then you are going to die. You want to be a gay? No, my God does not like gays. So there you go, you're dead. Woof, and he kills them. So how is it possible that so many Muslims get so radicalized and then people stand up and say, no, but this is not Islam. These are just renegades. These are just single, sick people. How is that possible? How can anybody explain this?
That probably falls into the category of people wanting to be altruistic, I suppose, wanting to be polite and say that Islam is a religion of peace. That whole category.
Yeah, I think we'll get to that a little bit later in the news because you have a lot of that. This so-called PC, this political correctness that we see everywhere, where the German Chancellor again went on and said, yeah, it's Islam is part and parcel, and don't do this, and don't cross the Muslims, and be nice to Muslims, because if you don't, they're going to kill you. What is that? I cannot understand people who do this, really. Okay, so there's no comments on this one. If we go and take a look at another, I mean, the Daily Mail, I mean, we know that we need to take this with a pinch of salt, but what I do is if I see something in the Daily Mail, I enter this into Google and then see if other newspapers come up with the same or similar story. So anyway, I mean, and please, I don't go specifically looking for this stuff, okay? It's just because it's violent and because it's vile, because it's sick, because it's horrific, we just, the media goes for this kind of thing. It's actually quite sick. But a female Muslim apparently laughed. Remember last week we talked about the massacre in Tunisia, where some guy just went and randomly killed people lying on the beach because a man in a swimming costume is immensely dangerous for Islam. So anyway, this woman, when she heard about this, that there were like 20, 30, I don't even know whether it's more by now, people were killed, she laughed. She gave a loud, this LOL, this lol on the social stuff. And she is somebody who recruits females, usually as brides. Now, I call them sex slaves or prostitutes or whatever, but she recruits women for the Muslim men fighting some imaginary enemy in Iraq and Syria for their imaginary God. And they take this justification for this, like we said, out of some Islamic texts. And because these men need women, and because women are second class anyway, you get females actually finding more females for these killers. And this woman finds the killing of innocent people funny because they are not part of her particular social club. I mean, how immensely primitive do you need to be, and how an anti-social, how callous and like crazy, without a stitch of decency or compassion or empathy or anything. How can you laugh at that and then recruit others to become just as inhumane? I mean, it's like, how I wonder how she was recruited, whether there was always also somebody who was laughing at the killing of others, and she thought, oh, this is brilliant, that's a club I need to join. It's I don't know, it's amazing.
Talking of women in ISIS, I just saw an article on the Rich Dawkins website. Do you know that they've just beheaded their first 2 women for sorcery? They've never beheaded women before. They've beheaded men, and they've obviously killed women with stoning and all sorts of shooting, firing squads. But they've just killed their first 2 women by beheading. So it's
sorcery.
Well done. They need to catch up on Saudi Arabia a bit. I think that's a good start too.
Do you have any details, like what kind of sorcery?
Yeah, it was on the Rich Dawkins website. I'm just looking at it now. 2 women have become the first to be beheaded by ISIS after being accused of witchcraft, sorcery. I'm not making this up. And working with elves by the Islamic extremist group, according to reports emerging from eastern Syria.
No, you can't make that up. Come on, I mean, it's so crazy. And they didn't put. What happens if you put water on a jinn?
Water on the jinn.
Yeah. I mean, if I now go outside and I take a hose pipe, I switch it on, or I switch on like a sprinkler, and I happen to catch a jinn who's just walking across the lawn. I mean, the jinn is made up out of fire. So what happens if the water hits the jinn? Does the jinn evaporate, or what happens? Or what happens if a jinn is caught in rain? Oh, shit. This is so stupid.
Not likely to be an issue in the Arabian desert.
Ah, well, I reckon that's why they used it. It doesn't make sense. I mean, really, a lot of things really do not make sense outside of the Arabian desert. Like, oh my goodness. But now, does anybody know, or can anybody guess, or hazard a guess, what kind of people would want to join Daesh? I mean, what kind of a woman goes off? I mean, do you think that a university graduate will say, listen, actually, I don't like this. I know that I'm going to be a doctor soon, or I'm going to be something, whatever. And let me not do that. Let me go and kill a couple of Christians in Syria, and maybe I will die as a martyr. Who does this?
What was her childhood like, though? Because obviously, children's brains are like a kind of empty hard drive, aren't they? Onto which you can install any operating system, as it were. So, I mean, if you can pretty much get them to believe anything.
Okay, but does that sort of, well, does that preclude? No, it doesn't. Or does it preclude intelligence?
I guess not. I guess if you get them to believe that they should be educated and then go off and kill non-Muslims, you can make them believe pretty much anything. I was thinking the other day, I reckon you could, if you brought a child up in the right conditions, in the right society, you could make them believe that old people turned into trees or something. And then if they happen to see an old person being cremated, well, you could make them believe that that's not really an old person, or, they'd somehow find a way to dismiss it. But the human mind seems to have this capacity to have a belief system and then interpret every, if you're not thinking critically, if you haven't been taught to think critically and rationally, you're just going to interpret all the inputs into your brain in the context of that belief system. And if it doesn't agree with the belief system, then the inputs are wrong. And
okay,
that does seem to be possible to do that.
Okay, but if you're intelligent, don't you pick that up?
It doesn't look like you do if you get strongly enough indoctrinated. Because again, the child's mind is almost completely empty of information. You're learning almost 100%.
I was taught as a kid that there's a God and there's a Jesus, and that blacks are second class, and we can do this, we can do that. I had that as a child. I mean, I was taught that Santa existed.
Were you actively discouraged from critical thinking and rational thinking?
No.
Were you actively discouraged from thinking about it? Because
no.
Yeah, so that might be why you were able to get past what you were initially taught.
So it requires not only the indoctrination, but also the like a a post-hypnotic command not to think about it.
Yeah, I think probably the way it works is that all of the inputs they're receiving are just being filtered through the doctrine that they already believe. Nothing can possibly conflict with the doctrine. So if it seems to conflict with the doctrine, then the inputs must be wrong. The doctrine can never possibly be wrong.
Okay. So paragraph 1, Dad is always right. Paragraph 2, if he wouldn't be, paragraph 1 comes into place.
What was paragraph 2?
No, paragraph 2 is if your dad is wrong, it's automatically back to paragraph 1, which is Dad is always right.
So you get taught stuff, but you're not taught not to question it. Then okay, you can change your beliefs later on. But I think with Islam, kids are taught to believe it, and then they're taught not to question it, and it's like taboo, isn't it? It's taboo in Islamic society and Islamic culture to question any doctrine.
Chapter 5, 101. Don't ask questions where the answer would cause you headaches. Don't question. Don't ask. Don't demand. By the way, talking about Daesh, before I go, what is worse? Why is it only Jeremy? We've got 15 people in the chat. And Lassa is coming in, bouncing out, bouncing back, coming in, going out. He must have real computer issues. What is the appeal today? Since Don, this mic, okay, they teach you about Allah, they teach you about Muhammad. Okay. This was too short. Now I need to go and call this up again. And this is, they teach you about Allah, they teach you about Muhammad. Then, when you are born again, a born again Muslim, you don't get a born again Muslim. They say, Syria, what are you going to do? 6 months later, you try hack a head off. Okay, I've never heard of this concept of a born again Muslim. I thought you only have reverts and you don't have converts or stuff like that. But then, yeah. But then, okay, let me ask one question. What is the appeal today of Daesh? What kind of people are attracted? Al-Aqsa is back, but he doesn't say anything. Okay, can anybody say what is the appeal today of Daesh? Who is the target audience? Who is the customer for their product? Anyone? No one?
I think the vacuum in modernity, where life doesn't seem to have a meaning. Those people who join IS from university backgrounds are seeking answers, a life worth living, perhaps.
A bad answer, an answer that's obviously made up, is better than no answer.
Yeah, but okay, why would anybody look at what Daesh is doing and say, wow, this is brilliant?
The people who join IS, I think, don't trust Western media. The portrayal of IS is misrepresentation of what IS are apparently living in a true Islamic state, following the Sharia, following the ways of the Prophet. I think people who join IS do not want Western media and don't trust it. So the beheadings, the burnings, and everything else which goes along with IS is reported by Western media. They shy away from.
Okay, that's an interesting thing. I've never thought of the media angle, because yes, I've come across that before, that people are actually quite adverse to what the media are saying. This is true. Okay, anybody else? Because that is actually a good angle. I need to remember that for next time, that the media is very, very much brought into play a lot of times. I hear this all the time, that a lot of people say, yeah, this is the Fox News Islam education or something, where Fox News seems to be like a I don't know, a popular synonym for media. What kind of propaganda would anybody see as being catchy? I mean, I'm going to talk about the propaganda just now, but what is it about the propaganda that Daesh is issuing that can appeal to anybody today? Is it the violence? Is it the look at us, we can take over an entire country, or what is it?
Maybe it's the same kind of thing that attracts people to gangs, being feeling welcomed into a group. But Islam has this added bonus of a Gott mit uns, higher cause.
True. I forgot about that. I actually once compared Islam to a Los Angeles street gang, because I said that the mannerisms, the rituals and everything are derived from their own group, from the in-crowd. Their kind of behavioral patterns, everything to do with behavior and rituals and everything is derived from that group. And then, of course, you get your positive feedback, your acceptance and everything from that group. And this is like a street gang, exactly. So that would be the kind of propaganda that people would like to see, because it reinforces the positive feedback that they would be getting. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, next point that I'm asking is, what is the basis? Yes, that is part of the psychology gang. You're a fanatic gang leader. Everything. When are you fucking gonna get a microphone? This is so tedious. Always having to read up whatever you're saying. Yara. What is the basis for anybody looking at the operation of Daesh? How they are operating, what they are operating, that they are declaring, well, we are a state now, and I am your boss, and you need to kneel before me. How does that fit in? Does it also fit in with a group gang? Well, you have a group leader. It reminds me of Grease, the movie with John Travolta. What about competition? Is there any competition to IS, to Daesh? No comments, no opinions? Hamas.
Sorry, I'm actually cooking. I am listening. I am cooking. Challenge to IS. The question is, why do people join IS and not Al Qaeda?
Well, what is the competition? I mean, yes, we have Hezbollah, we have Hamas, we have Al Qaeda, we have I don't know, all sorts of groups. So is that really the competition?
I think the fact that they're conquering land a lot more than Boko Haram, Al Qaeda, and they are creating so-called state.
But they're not. I mean, it's empty
Muslims.
desert.
Justification that Allah is.
So the empty desert and a couple of cities, that's
Pardon?
enough?
And the feel that the feeling that they're
That's how
expanding,
Muhammad lived.
continually expanding. In fact, isn't that their motto? The motto of IS, expand, growing and expanding, or something?
I don't know, actually.
I know maybe I've been playing too many computer games, but from my perspective, it's a more exciting idea to be part of a state that you can sort of point to on a map and you can see the borders. Whereas with Al Qaeda, you just got a bunch of cells. You look on the map, there's no Al Qaeda land. Whereas with the Islamic State, you can kind of expand. It's I don't know, it's almost like a computer game, really, isn't it? Where you have to expand your territory and defeat the neighbouring enemies and that sort of thing.
More deserts.
Well, except that there's a bunch of big Iraqi cities and Syrian cities that are on the borders that they could perhaps look to take over. And they've got all that. They've got all that US what do you call it? All the US arms that they gave the new Iraqi state that they took over when they captured was in Mosul. They just got loads of firepower.
That's true, yeah. So what do you see the goals as being? Because I've tried to find the goals and how they want to be seen as or perceived as. And well, the first thing that came to mind is that they are always the victim. So they are the ones who are saying, well, you are not leaving us alone. So what we're doing now is we're doing it ourselves. So this is now our territory, our country. So fuck off from out of here. We are the ones who are, it's our say now. It's our place.
I'd take them at face value on their goals, which is, the one day you look on a map and you'll see the Islamic State all the way from Morocco to Pakistan or Bangladesh or something, and then they can start looking at expanding into Asia and Europe and taking over the whole world. That's what they claim they want, isn't it?
Have you seen this boy who is standing in the middle of, I can't remember where he's standing, and he's saying, well, we are now sending Obama an ultimatum, and if he doesn't comply, we are going to take over the United States. And we will bomb you, and we will bomb you, because it's all about violence and bombing and like. So it's quite funny. So is it really a state? No, it's not. Is there any unity? No, there is not. Is there any acceptance? No, there's not. Is it really God-based? Well, I don't know whether it's God-based. Is it revolutionary? No. Is it rigorous? No. Is it? I mean, what the hell are they really trying to do? And then, of course, there's problems. You have internal problems because now that it's a larger group, now the infighting carries on or starts. And then other Muslims are saying, no, this is not really anything about Islam the way that we see Islam being propagated. Then we have the external problems where no country takes them seriously anyway. And then you have the internal, like Iraq, then you have the rest of the world, then you have the conflict between Shias and Sunnis, and neither accept Daesh. So I don't know what this is. And then you have the attempt at solutions. There you have the internal solutions where people are saying, well, we need to go according to Islam, let's follow Muhammad, let's do this. And that's not going to work. Then they have the external solutions where the States, the UK, France, and all sorts of countries are saying, well, hang on, what can we do? And now it gets interesting because I think there's three different ways here to actually solve this. Because one is the propaganda machine. If what Anonymous is doing, and that is hacking into the websites and modifying the messages, this could severely hurt them, because this is, I think, the only way that they're able to recruit people, and that is through social media. And then this is how they get their credibility and all their content. So if anybody were to go and take a fact and say, well, this is what Daesh is claiming, and look at the reality, it's the opposite, then this would be a blow to them. And then, of course, you have the soldiers. I don't know if the military intervention is going to work here in any way. Okay, but now...
When you say they're not properly a state, I mean, you're thinking of it from a kind of rational, mature point of view. You're perhaps thinking of the sort of institutions that a state would normally have.
Like borders,
if you're thinking about it from the point of view of, I don't know, some young guy who's full of hormones and stuff, they just want to... They want to go and fight for almost in a sort of computer game kind of way. You know, they look at a map and they see borders around a thing that's labelled as Islamic State, and they see, you know, a leader. They're not really thinking of it in the way that you are they? They're not really thinking, well, let's look at the institutions that it has. They're just thinking that's the new caliphate.
So there's no consequences here yet. There's no follow-up.
Well, they're just not really seeing a state in the same way that you are, I guess.
Probably not. So they're just saying, as long as we carry on killing people and just being here and killing anybody who comes in that we don't like, this is our state. Maybe something like that. Yeah.
And potentially expanding the borders as well is what they see happening. And obviously that fits in with Islamic doctrine.
I hear that they... So I don't know if this is true or not, that they actually went and minted a coin. I think this is so funny. It's hilarious.
They did what, sorry?
Sorry, what?
They did what?
They minted a coin. Currency. In the chat, I've got I am Sunchild. Now, if you are vocal, if you have so much to say, why don't you come into the show and then discuss it here instead of just typing like crazy? Isn't it easier to just go and discuss this with us here on the panel than going there and typing like crazy? I mean, it's just an idea. Anyway, Daesh. I'm still talking about them because, after all the propaganda, after all these videos, it gets a lot worse. Because Daesh have released another dramatic and, in my eyes, horrific video. And you think, I always think their brutality can't be topped. And then they do. Because it's absolutely amazing when they started beheading people, and I thought, well, it can't get worse, and then it does. And now what they've done... Okay, we know that they went into this ancient city in Syria, and they marched some 20 men into the amphitheater. I mean, this thing is like 2,000 years old. So they marched 20 men in there, in Palmyra. Then they have them get down on their knees, and then they position some kids behind them with a gun, and then the kids shoot them. The kids shoot grown-ups in a stadium filled with people. I mean, how pathetic, how primitive, how violent, brutal. I mean, I don't have words for this. And I don't understand who enjoys such a spectacle. How can any human being sit there and say, yeah, we are the greatest, and our God says exactly this, and this is what we want, and this is exactly what it is that we need to do. How is that possible?
But think of the evolutionary roots of human beings.
I think you can justify it.
The evolutionary roots of human beings. You know, we've got like cerebellum, but we're not that far removed from apes. You know, primitive apes. Sorry, that beat to death any neighbouring tribe. So it doesn't take that much to get people back down to their primal roots again.
Yeah, but to make a
spectacle out of it, you have to work hard to maintain civilization.
But to make a spectacle out of it.
Well, again, it's just feeding into this primitive, we're killing our rival tribe, primitive bloodlust mentality. I think it's just evidence of how closely, how not so far removed we are from, the common ancestor between us and chimpanzees. That we've still got this primal part of our brain that you can quite easily turn on.
Amazing. I am Sunchild. No, this is not Skype. You just go on hangout.godless.ch and you end up here. There's no Skype or something. So it looks like you're just a bullshitter. Somebody is a troll, somebody who just wants to cause some shit here. So, okay. Do you want some contrasting news? A student in a school in the UK drew her older sister-in-law breastfeeding her baby because this was a competition called Mother and Child. I mean, it was nothing sexual or overly exposed or something, very tasteful. And it was removed from the exhibition in the UK. Okay, this is not in Saudi Arabia or something. No, this was in the UK. Do you want to guess the reason, or has anybody read this? What the reason was why the painting was removed, where a normal, like a student in a school paints her sister-in-law breastfeeding the child, not with the boobs in full view, but just the child. Any reason?
What kind of a school was it?
No, public school.
Potentially offensive.
You got it. The reason is it might offend Muslims during Ramadan. This is the level of political correctness you get in the UK, where they are pandering. I mean, this is, for me, it's absolutely astonishing how much they pander to the Muslims in the country. How they are saying it might just offend Muslims. Just because Muslims are so hung up on their puritanical view, and they reject anything to do with sex or something, the rest of the world has to go and now abandon. I mean, I didn't choose my logo as a the Mona Lisa with the burqa on for nothing. I mean, that's exactly where we are at the moment. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing that a country will stoop to this level and say, well, we might just offend some idiots who believe in some God, and because it's Ramadan and blah, blah, blah. And that's why we now cannot show the paintings what we might. Tesco's and bacon-flavored Pringles. Okay, so you're not allowed to have bacon-flavored Pringles. I mean, what is this? What next? What next? What is the reaction going to be? I mean, are we going to abolish gay marriages again because Muslims are offended by gays? My goodness. Okay.
There's a video by a guy called Skeptor on YouTube. He's done a video on a thing called pathological altruism, which seems to go some way of explaining modern political correctness. People basically think that they're helping, but actually in so doing they're harming much more than they're helping.
What's it called? Pathological altruism?
Yeah.
It's a brilliant term. I need to remember this. Pathological altruism. Self-destructive altruism, I would say. Wow, that's brilliant. That's a nice
taking it way too far. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, and then finally, my final news item. What country is this? 2 people are in court for insulting the dead king. Is that in North Korea? No, it's KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Somebody said something about the king who died. They are now in court. They're banned from TV. They're not allowed any public appearances. They're not allowed anything because they said something which is, I mean, it's not bad or something. It's just, it was not respectful towards the king. And it was absolutely amazing that they have now banned from everything in public because they said something about the dead king. And I thought only North Korea does stupid things like that. No, KSA also does this. Absolutely astonishing. God,
Will you be doing an Eid special?
Sorry, will I be doing what?
An Eid special?
An Eid special? No. No. Just in case people don't know, you have Ramadan. At the moment, it's Ramadan, okay, which goes from the first sighting of the new moon until the end. During this time period, the 9th month of the year is called Ramadan, and you're supposed to fast during the daytime, where there are different interpretations what daytime is. But anyway, you're supposed to fast. Now, Muslims make this look like it's some big deal, where most Muslims don't even follow this anymore, but they do drink and they have sex and they have all sorts of things. Maybe they don't eat, maybe they skip lunch, and then they say, oh my God, I've been fasting and I'm so weak and I'm so everything, da, 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 da. This is what Ramadan normally means. And then on Friday they will go to the mosque, or in this case in non-Muslim countries probably on a Sunday or Saturday or something. And then they say, okay, now we've done this for 1 month, which is not a month, but it's only 4 weeks. And then they will say, okay, now we need to have a party because we have successfully mastered Ramadan. We have been fasting during Ramadan. Well, they haven't. They've skipped lunch. And then they will have a huge party. And what is quite funny is if you are in a Muslim majority country, you will not know how long this Eid is going to be. You know from experience what to expect, but then the respective ruler will issue a command, and then Diwan, the government or the administrative authority, will issue an email to all government departments saying, okay, this year Eid is going to be from Saturday until Thursday or something. Or maybe it's only 3 days, or maybe it's 4 days. You never know in advance. It depends on the mood of the emir or the king or the whoever is issuing this. And then the whole country has off. That's why if it's Ramadan and the couple of days afterwards, you don't spend in the country. You fly somewhere else, you go on holiday or something, because there's nothing that you can do. There's nothing useful in the form of work, unless you have to write. I mean, I've stayed because I had to write something and I just continued working on my own. But in reality, there's not much that you can do with anybody else. And then when this is over, these 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, they are called Eid. Now you have different Eids. You have the Eid al-Fitr. Okay, it doesn't matter, but you have different Eids. You have another Eid where they celebrate the sacrifice, the human sacrifice, where this crazy God commands a human that they need to sacrifice their child. And of course, this human does this, and then the God says, oh, no, sorry, I was wrong, and then sends an angel and says, no, you don't need to do this, because God is all merciful. I mean, what an idiotic idea. Anyway, so they go and celebrate this. But this is the second Eid. But this big Eid that is coming up in, when was it, in 2 weeks? This is going to be the major Eid, the one where everybody goes crazy and eats and is present. This is like the Christmas in...
Isn't the month of Ramadan the sacred month?
Yep. Well, there are several sacred months in Islam, but this is the sacred month, yeah.
I thought they're not supposed to kill in the sacred month.
They're not supposed to kill in the sacred month.
Yeah.
Except for ISIS. ISIS specifically kill people in during Ramadan.
Well, so did Muhammad. I mean, where did he go after Mecca? During Ramadan. So there's a lot of things what Muhammad did during Ramadan where he just said, no, stuff this, all the rules are for others, not for me. I'm going to do it differently.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the same with his wives. Everybody else has, is allowed 4 wives or 9 wives, depending on how you read it. He had 14 or whatever. So, yeah, it's a little bit different.
I was told by a Muslim that because ISIL are killing in the month of Ramzan, they're not true Muslims. Because during the sacred month, Muslims don't kill anybody.
Well, then Muhammad was not a true Muslim.
I'll say that to next time.
Yeah, I quite like this video, as I was mentioning earlier, about it's a BBC interview of Maajid Nawaz, which is from about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, maybe. I think it kind of confirms my suspicions that Sam Harris was actually working on a book with him recently, because he was sort of seeing him as someone who could reform, because he used to be sort of extremist Muslim, and now he's sort of meant to be a moderate Muslim. But I personally think if you've seen how ridiculous your extremist Islam is, you should really go to being an atheist. I think there's something suspect about thinking, oh well, this is total bullshit, but I'm going to believe some of it. But anyway, he's having this interview with BBC News, and he's just using these really broad strokes to define people, either extremely politically correct and always saying that Islamic terrorist attacks have nothing to do with Islam, literally nothing to do with Islam, it's all about social circumstances, and then he describes people who say that they've got everything to do with Islam as anti-Muslim bigots. So I just think his description is ridiculous. And then he goes on to admit that ISIS are just getting back to the Islamic roots. So I think he's got more. I think he's got more respect than he deserves, really, because the stuff that he says doesn't make any sense to me. Really, it seems contradictory.
I know what you mean, and the problem is that I understand his dilemma because I have the same problem. The thing is that I have a lot of respect for the guy for what he says because it makes so much sense. What he cannot do, he cannot express himself properly because he doesn't get the time to do so. When he gets the time, he does it. But normally, like in these interviews, he doesn't get the time, and he cannot say what he actually. This is why he actually. It seems as though he contradicts himself. I've also had that. I said, "Why is he saying that?" And then I rewind and listen to it again, and then it makes sense. Because what he is then saying is because of that, it could appear that this, and then it comes off as, and then he explains it. But sometimes he just skips that. And then he says, well, they're not Muslims because they're not doing this, but they're going back to Islam. And then it looks as though this is a contradiction, but actually it's not. So you need to explain this in a bit deeper mode, which he can't because he doesn't have the time. So you are right, he shouldn't be doing that. But he tries so hard to explain these things to people within a limited time frame, which you can't do. That's why we have the Gin and Tonic show for 2 hours, where sometimes it's much too long and sometimes it's much too short, depending on what you talk about.
Yeah, okay, but I don't think that excuses calling anyone who says the attacks have everything to do with Islam as an anti-Muslim bigot. I mean, the dictionary definition is a person who is utterly intolerant of any differing creed, belief, or opinion. So if you are a Christian and you believe in democracy, and you say, okay, anything that isn't Christian and democratic is awful, and I totally hate it. Okay, fair enough, that's bigoted. ISIS are bigoted. They say anything that isn't our flavour of Islam and isn't completely Sharia, that's bigoted. But if that's a whitelist approach. That's a whitelist approach. That's saying this one way of doing things is acceptable, everything else is unacceptable. But people who say these attacks have everything to do with Islam, or maybe a particular form of Islam, that's a blacklist approach. That's saying, okay, this one set of beliefs is something that I hate or disapprove of. So he's just misusing the word bigoted. It's this happens all the time in UK politics. It's really annoying. They can just throw these labels around, and you have a kind of chilling effect because people are scared to criticise Islam in any way because, oh, then you're a bigot. And I think it's really unhelpful to the conversation for that kind of terminology to be used.
It's true.
Could you invite him as a guest?
Sorry?
Could you invite him as a guest?
I have. Did you get that?
Yeah, got it, sorry.
Okay. I have, but he doesn't respond. I mean, come on, we're too small fry. But I have tried. You know, the thing is, I run around, I invite like all sorts of people. And I send them emails and I say, look, we're the Gin and Tonic Show, we're trying to do this, and da-da-da, would you be willing to either do an interview or spend some time with us, and da-da-da-da. And a lot of times people will say yes, and other times people will say, no, I'm not interested, I can't, or blah, 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 I've prior commitments. And some will simply not react at all. So I've tried. I mean, my idol is somebody like Irshad Manji. I mean, I love this woman. If I were a woman, I would become a lesbian just to have an affair with her because I think she is so brilliant. And I've tried inviting her a couple of times, but she also doesn't react. She is somebody who is really into reform, and she's a woman, so she can talk about women's rights and things like that. And I think she's brilliant, she's vocal, and she can express herself, and I'd love to have her on the show, but it doesn't always work. You know, you can't always, have what you want.
She considers herself a Muslim?
Yeah.
I'm always interested as to why an otherwise rational person would consider themselves a Muslim.
Well, she says she enjoys the rigor, she enjoys the very clear rules that you can extract from Islam. She says for her, there's a spirituality there that where she says she likes the idea of a God being there. And that's it. So she would like to have a God. I mean, I have a friend who also has a God, but her God is not the God of the Bible or Quran or anything. It's just her personal God. This is something that she has created and that she thinks is good for her. And she thinks that whatever is, it's the typical God of the gaps, and it makes sense for her. And she likes this. She likes this idea of there being a God. And that's it. And she says, well, that's what I need, that's what I want, and this is why I have created my own God. And she is a very rational person otherwise, but here she's not. And I think this is the case with this Irshad Manji girl, because she also does that. She also says, well, I enjoy the idea, the concept of a God being there. And like I said, sure, I would love there to be a God who's like Batman and Superman and Spider-Man all wrapped in one. So that the asshole who squeezed in, going in the straight lane, the straight only lane, and then squeezing into the left lane, and everybody has to brake, and everybody is inconvenienced because of him, so that this asshole gets punished somehow, that he can't go to heaven, or he doesn't get his mansion in heaven, but he gets punished. That would be brilliant. I'd love that. I mean, if all the assholes that you have, and all the fraudsters, all the people who are conning others, who get away with it, that they get some sort of punishment later on. I mean, what a brilliant concept. I'd love this to be true. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
But her position sounds a bit like deism. It's very vague belief in there being a God, and sort of he's holding me spiritually, so it's sort of warm and fuzzy. But why would you tie yourself to all the baggage of? Why would you tie yourself to all the baggage of Islam to do that? Why wouldn't you just be a deist?
No, but it needs to be a personal one. A deity is not a personal God.
Okay, well, why not pick a more friendly religion than Islam then?
Well, of course, you can argue that. Absolutely. I mean, it's it depends on what you want and what you see and what you think is good for you. So there's different people have different ideas about what their God should be like. And I suppose her idea, and I mean, she's originally from Iran. She was a Shia, and so I suppose this is how she grew up, and so for her it was natural to keep the God and throw away all the useless stuff. Of course, it's cherry picking, absolutely. But she is somebody who says, okay, we need to, and this is what I love about her, that she says, listen, we need to take ownership of Islam. We need to, acknowledge that there is some negativity, just as Christians have acknowledged this in the past. And we need to say, okay, now we're just going to either ignore this, but we need to acknowledge that it exists. So if a Muslim comes to me and says, yes, Muhammad was a rapist, yes, Muhammad was this and this and this, but he also had some positive effects on other people, I respect that. Because it is somebody who is honest and who acknowledges the negative sides. If somebody comes to me and says, yes, Islam is actually quite a violent ideology, and it's all about expansion and dominance and things like that, but I can also derive some sort of spiritual comforting sentiment or whatever in this, all right, then I respect this. What I don't respect are assholes who say Islam is all about peace and it's all wonderful, and Muhammad is the idol and for all times and the most valuable human being, and I love him more than my family. That's when I want to throw up.
Just to Godwinize things again then. What if someone came along and said, I'm a Nazi, and there were some positive things about the Nazis,
cool. Yep.
Gave the German people more confidence, but obviously I don't accept all the nasty stuff. You're saying you'd respect that?
You'd respect that
more
because yes, because it's somebody.
Nazi.
Yeah, because it's somebody who says, look, there's the negative side, and I know about that. But what I take from that is this and this and this. Then that's cool, because it means that he.
I think that's extremely. That would be an extremely minority opinion. I mean, the second someone's going to say they're a Nazi, people aren't going to wait around to listen for the subtleties about what they reject about Nazism. They're just going to assume that they accept the cause of Nazism.
No, but it's just a label.
The core beliefs and values of Nazism.
Yeah, but hang on, it's a label. I mean, if I put on the label atheist, what do you know about me? Nothing. I mean, if I put on the label...
Well, that's because it's kind of like a negative label. It doesn't positively assert anything other than that you don't believe in a God.
Okay, what if I put on the label, I don't know, what can I think of? A teetotaler. Or how about, what are the people who don't eat meat?
Vegetarians,
vegetarian.
vegans.
What about a vegetarian? If I'm a vegetarian, what do you know about me? Nothing. Only that as a vegetarian, you only know that I will not... eat
the core beliefs, yeah.
As a teetotaler,
I guess the question,
you only know that I don't drink alcohol, but you don't know anything else about this.
Yeah, I think the reason people would generally judge someone who calls themselves a Nazi immediately without, waiting to listen to the subtleties of what aspects of Nazism they agree with, is because the core aspects are the nasty ones.
Yeah, but that's
so I guess the question is, are the core aspects of Islam the nasty, expansionist, intolerant ones, which I think they are. I think they are basically the core aspects of Islam, and whereas the politically correct opinion, the politically correct opinion is that the core aspects are, I suppose, varied, but sort of mainly peaceful.
Okay, this approach I like, and I agree with you. To differentiate between the emotional sort of association that we have with the word Islam, and then looking at the core tenets of this ideology, or whatever you want to call it, and that you then say, well, in the core it is based only on one single thing, and that is the implementation of Sharia, which is dominant and suppressive, and there you go. And then this is the core idea, which is negative. That I agree with, yes. And that is based on violence and and that does not happen via persuasion or gentle whatever. No, it's brutal coercion, absolutely. Oh shit, I agreed with you. Now what?
That's not supposed to happen.
Yeah,
Want
she
to
was banned
agree
in Malaysia. I didn't
you
even
reach-
know that she was banned. You can't create your own God. Why? Because God can't be created. All gods are created by humans, of course he is. God is just there. No, every God is just created. Profanity, watch it Arab. It's not asshole, it's not profanity, and I'm not an Arab. I sinned. Well, sin doesn't exist. Sin is nonsense. It's also stories. We don't know the full facts. I mean, this is... Why do you write so much nonsense? Why do you write so much without saying anything? Everyone has different angles of perception of light or truth. No. You can look at light any which way. It's always the same light. It's always photons being emitted, and you can even measure it. So it's... I don't know. Therefore, it clashes with others. No, it doesn't. Then there's war. Like a prism of light. Come on, man. Or girl, or whatever. You're not making much sense. I don't know. What is your motivation? I am son of child 196. Can you tell me why the hell you are here? What are you doing here? ISIS means I. Oh my goodness. Okay, never mind. All right, guys. Any closing comments? Any other closing questions? Anything else? A pre-typed reply as my last words, microphone or Islam 1001 inventions to make Stopspamming and wow! Shit. You know the trigger points. Okay, well, what can you do? I'm actually thinking of creating 1001 response channel just to irritate them. But the problem is that they know how YouTube works, okay? So this is a bit, it's stupid. Because as soon as you put anything on 1001 inventions, they can't handle any little bit of criticism, okay? They want to get all cozy with the United Nations there in UNESCO now with this Al-Haytham project of their, with the Light project, and they don't need any kind of interference, any kind of truth, because anybody who now tells the world that they are actually real conmen and fraudsters, that doesn't go down well with UNESCO. So this is what they're trying to stop. So there you go. Okay, I want to talk, I want to take 2 minutes about the Hadith of the week, because I've got an unusual one, a little bit of a different one, which I want to combine with a little bit of knowledge transfer. I don't know if people actually know that in between the Quran and the Hadith, there is a level which is in between, which is called the Qudsi Hadith, which are sayings which actually should be in the Quran because they come directly from God, but they were not included in the Quran because they were transmitted only to Muhammad, who went and either dreamt them or... there's a difference. The Qudsi Hadith, there's 40 of them. They're saying they are different in that they were transmitted directly. I thought the Quran was transmitted directly, and they are not part of the Quran because they came later. Nobody really knows where they come from. But one of them, I think the first and the most interesting one, says when Allah, in other words God, when this God decreed the creation, in other words, when he decided to create stuff, he pledged himself, in other words, he doesn't have free will, because he has to now follow what he said to himself, otherwise he would be a liar, by writing in his book, which is laid down with him. In other words, he wrote the book and he has the original copy. My mercy prevails over my wrath, or wrath, whichever way you want to pronounce it. So my mercy prevails over my wrath. So in other words, if you misbehave and you during Ramadan you kill somebody, then you can be forgiven whatever, because this God is not going to be so angry with you because he's more merciful. Now, this is absolute nonsense, of course, because you still have hell. I mean, if he were, more merciful than angry, there would be no maximum punishment, because there would always be a degree of mercy, which automatically means there can't be any hell. But there is hell, so he's not more merciful. So God is a liar. So there you go. The same as, I mean, in the Bible, you have the same thing where he says, I'm not so angry, I'm not doing this, and then he drowns everybody, all animals, all children, all everything. So stupid. Again, these Qudsi Hadith, there's 40 of them, and this is the Hadith of the week this time. If you want to go and look at the others, they're equally funny. Go and have fun. See you soon. Cheers and bye-bye from the Gin and Tonic Show. See you next week.